Welcome to the KOFISI Connect podcast, and in this episode we unravel the intricacies of successful team building in African businesses, exploring the pivotal role of a well-crafted hiring strategy and shedding light on the benefits of engaging recruitment companies in the process, as businesses navigate the challenges of finding the right talent in the diverse and dynamic African job market. Understanding effective hiring strategies becomes paramount, as does identifying skilled individuals to ensure a cultural fit for sustained success. Well, with me today is Vincent Aberi, a headhunter from Stanton Chase, Sehar Neky from Hire Africa, and Martin Openda, a talent analyst and a fellow host of the podcast Retooled Africa. So he'll be helping me out today. Yep. Welcome, Martin. Well, thank you, everybody, for your time. So headhunting, I must say this is a kind of industry that has seen a meteoric rise in the last decade. Does anyone want to kind of kick off by telling me why they think that is?
Well,
Everyone's too polite.
Yes, for sure. The industry has evolved quite a bit, and basically there's been a focus, and especially getting the right talent and the right fit for organizations, which I'll call a cultural fit, and then diversity as well. So many companies are now looking across board on how do we get the right talent to really fit with our strategies and move the organizations forward. And there's a science to it in our industry. And we see a lot of experts going into this space because they understand the different industries and different verticals. Now, for example, financial services, you'll find, for example, myself as a career banker and getting into this space. So if I'm going to talk to clients who are in the financial services space, then I will be able to understand what they're looking for, what they're trying to achieve. And I think talent and matching it with organizations has now become where experienced experts are now coming in to really be the fit and to bridge the gap. So I see that's how search has actually evolved from just HR function to really now expertise in the market.
And how do you think, Sehar, maybe do you want to add to that, or is that?
Yeah, I think, for me, what I see, especially in terms of the rise of executive search and headhunting and recruitment in Africa, I think there's been a huge challenge when it comes to talent scarcity. And I think that's been really sort of the need on the continent and had sort of been the reason for a lot of executives moving into this space, HR coming to the forefront, talent acquisition coming to the forefront. Specific skill sets are hard to find, particularly at leadership levels, in specific industries. Of course, tech, as we know, there's a huge shortage of tech talent. But other industries as well, healthcare across the continent, there's a huge shortage. Even in Kenya, there's large infrastructure projects coming up, and, skill sets within the construction space is missing, even retail. So I think, what I see is there's a big gap there. Good talent there's fierce competition for good talent. And I think that's why, employers have had to sort of think outside the box in terms of the hiring strategies, and also start, using partners, executive search firms, recruitment firms, to be able to tap into that talent, to be able to search for that talent. Putting out a job advert doesn't, bring the results that, you need. So many candidates, I think, are passive candidates as well. So it's really about actively headhunting, as you call it. And then I think the second sort of gap that I've personally seen as well is there just seems to be a huge gap between, qualified, talented job seekers and employers looking for top talent. There's always candidates saying, I'm in the market, I'm sending out my CV, I need, I'm looking, but I don't know where to find the right jobs. And then on the flip side, there's employers saying, I'm looking for top talent, I just can't seem to get it. And so I think that's where recruitment firms come in. It's really to bridge that gap. And I think from a platform perspective, I've seen LinkedIn, of course, now come in to also bridge that gap. And it's, especially over the last couple of years, they've increased their usage, they've increased their presence in Africa. A couple of years ago, the number of people in Kenya on LinkedIn, was much lower.
Interesting.
Yeah. Now I've seen the rise of it. I've seen people engaging with it as a, as a platform.
Martin, have you sort of encountered? I mean, we were talking earlier a little bit about the kind of the brain drain, as it were. People who have been well educated tend to go to sort of universities abroad, or they get training abroad. Tell me a little bit about your kind of experiences with that, and how does one attract diaspora back to Kenya or to any other African country?
I think there's been a move. So it's always been there that people have looked at foreign degrees as being something that they want to have on their roster. But more recently, it's become more of the need for diversity and the need for having exponential leaps in your business by having people who have diverse talent. And that diverse talent could mean, let me hire someone who is working in Uganda to come and work in Kenya.
Sure.
It could mean, let me look for someone who's been doing tech in Amsterdam to come back here. And what we are now seeing also is that Kenyans are getting to a level where they are self-educating, they are self-learning, they're retooling themselves so they become available to the global market. And you do have people getting hired out of here. You have people coming here to start up something as little as a call center. What that does is that it gives you the exposure to these foreign markets, which then allows you to interact with these foreign markets. And eventually, as you continue reskilling, then you get to a space where you can be hired by foreign companies. Biggest issue is our competition as far as salary is concerned. That's a big issue. And you have really smart people. You have really great ideas in the form of startups. And that gap that exists between, I'm a startup, I have a great idea, I need great minds to come in. As Sehar was saying earlier, we don't necessarily have all that talent resident in the country. And so you have to look outside to try and attract these people back. And a lot of what I'm seeing when I speak to these individuals or candidates who are sitting outside the country is, what's the why? What's the why for this company? And then can I link that to my own why? And so for the companies, their strategy is, what is our culture? How are we going to bring our why to the front and actually be true to our why? And so, looking at it from a startup perspective, looking at the people who are sitting in KOFISI, a lot of young businesses looking for that, people who have either a similar idea or similar mindset to them. How do I craft myself and be brave enough to put out my why to the world to attract this talent? Because if you're trying to compete on a money platform, you will fall flat on your face. And I have seen people who are happy to take a pay cut because a lot of people still want to come back and have impact, whether it's back in Uganda, in Nigeria, in Egypt, in Pakistan, where I've done some work. They want to go back, but they need to find those companies where their why really interacts or intersects. And so that narrative, and not just a story, but a story that you can be true to as a business, needs to come to the front.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it's I think for someone, because Kenya is expensive, for someone to come back from the diaspora to come back to live the same quality of life that they were living abroad in Kenya, that's expensive.
Yes.
And that's, I think,
you have to look at it from that perspective of, I'm not going to come back to, I might take a lower amount, if I'm earning 100,000, I'll come back for 60,000. If I was living in New York in 6x6 space, you're coming back here and I'm telling you for the same amount of money, you have a 3-bedroom house. And so the value or the quality of life will shift upwards for a smaller amount. That makes sense. But you also, as a business, you can't come out here and say, no, I only want to pay 10,000 to people who are earning 100,000. There's that reality check that we need to get to, I feel. You wanted to add?
Yes, I'm a product of what you guys are discussing about. Back in 2013, yes, I actually moved out from the States. And and it was the same conversation. Take a pay cut, but I knew where I wanted to be and what I wanted to do. I was very clear with my career path and strategies of what I wanted to contribute back to my own country. So that to me rings a bell. How do you balance those two? The people who are really, really wanting to come back, they ask those questions every single day. How did you do it? And so basically is be open-minded, because the opportunity for you to grow and do something great in your life, in your career, so you weigh what's more important to you. But eventually you will probably get to where you need to be. And that's just that was my journey. So
what moved the needle for you? What moved you from, okay, this is an opportunity, it's back home.
Yeah.
What really gave you that the yes factor?
The passion. Okay. I was very clear what I wanted to do. Yes, I had to take a substantial pay cut, but that didn't worry me so much, because I knew that what I'm doing is far much greater than the money. So you have to look at different factors. You have family around you. There's so many things that being back home offers you just than money. It's so you really have to equate what's your purpose. I think that's really the focus on it. What's your purpose? Is it money or some people? I've spoken to various friends, having lived abroad for close to 20 years, and they find it very difficult to come back. It's because of the money factor. They can't afford me, and of course, yes, they can't, because look at the different qualities of life. I mean, living abroad is expensive, so they have to pay you that much for you to have a quality of life. You just have to adjust yourself and say, do I need to adjust my life? And then have that balance and then grow. And many people have done that. They've come back, they adjusted, and they've grown. And they're in positions now where they never thought they'll be. And that's just how things work.
But I also think that kind of adds to the sort of evolution of what people need from work as well. Like, it's not just now about the money. It's about well-being. It's about where you might want to work, which I'm sure is something that everybody considers. Well, HR experts sort of consider. I'm just wondering, especially with the impact of the global pandemic, what kind of changes have you observed in the HR and recruitment practices for African businesses? And the evolution as well. I mean, the business landscape here. I mean, I've been here 5 years, and things are just changing every day. It feels. How do you kind of evolve your strategies to kind of look after the evolving landscape?
I mean, I think one of the, if I can say, the benefits, or at least the upsides of what was what was not the best times. But with the pandemic, I think one of the biggest things it's done is it's just reshaped the way we think about work. And that it just accelerated it. It probably would have taken 10, 15 years to get to where we are now. Just in terms of rethinking the idea of having to report into work 8 to 5 in a cubicle, in an office, the idea of opening that up, flexible working times, working from home, remote working. It's just changed the way we think about work. So I've definitely seen, I think from a recruitment perspective, one thing is people are far more comfortable with video interviews, video conversations. Before it was always very much, we must meet in person, which, to be honest, wastes a lot of time, right, for executives, for recruiters, even hiring managers within organizations. So it's just been able to, ensure recruitment practices are far more efficient, more effective. It has also widened the talent pool available. Because again, now you can connect with candidates in different regions. You can also consider hiring candidates in different regions. Yeah. So one thing I've definitely seen is the idea of remote work. Now it doesn't mean you have to hire in Kenya. You can actually look into other African markets. You can look globally. As Martin was saying, even African talent is now open to global opportunities. And there's so many individuals now who I know who are working remotely for businesses in the US. So I think it's just opened that up significantly. I think the challenges, of course, that come with it is, and I see this now, a little bit of conflict sometimes when businesses want to go back to the way things were, focusing on, we need to be back into the office, and candidates or employees still wanting that flexible working schedule. And so, trying to, I guess, marry the two and figure out how can you, provide some flexibility, which people now very much prioritize, while still also, getting people together, because of course there are upsides to engaging on a daily basis. So I think from an HR perspective, one of the things, of course, is marrying the two. Second, I think it's being also a shift towards being far more objective driven and performance driven and deliverables driven, as opposed to sort of a time check, how many hours have you worked. So you have to be a lot more clear in terms of what are the expectations and what are the deliverables. Because of course the worry is always when people are working remotely, how do you know they're achieving what they need to achieve? How do you measure that? And so there's a huge trust factor that comes in. And I think that's then about making sure that it's very clear what the objectives and deliverables are.
It's become much data, as you say, data-driven, and OKRs, KPIs, and all these kind of little anagrams as well. And how has tech kind of changed the industry? Would you say, is that for the better or for the worse?
I think tech has really helped organizations accelerate, in terms of where they want to be and what they want to do. A lot of disruptions actually came in during the pandemic, and a lot of industries were born out of it, and there was a lot of growth during the pandemic because businesses had to figure out how to reach out to their customers. There was no paper pushing processes. Now they have to rethink, how do we engage with our clients? How do we get them to consume our products? I'm talking about a whole redesign of features in products, customer journey processes. I mean, everything just was redesigned, and I think that is here to stay because people already adapted to the new way of thinking, to the new way of interacting with customers. And that has also been a factor to how then employees then relate to their job functions. Because for people who don't need to be in the office, they can do virtually everything at home. Companies had to set up mechanisms to be able to do performance management, even with remote work. So I think the future is continuing to evolve as we see it. And I don't think we've reached a peak yet. There's still a lot of redesign of thinking on how then the future will look like. But we've seen a glimpse of it. That the world as we see it now has become very, very digital. And I see that's something to tell what the future will be like. Yeah.
And the other thing that I think has probably changed as well is retention strategies as well. That feels to me like something that's personal development plans, which I know we at KOFISI we use. It was very tech driven, and making sure that once you've got somebody, you've got a decent hire, that you put in place the strategies to kind of hold on to them, because that's another, I suppose, something to do. The brain drain, the constant kind of retraining and moving on up. How would you sort of implement, or what sort of strategies kind of work in this kind of in the African environment? Would you say, or would you say it's more industry driven?
So maybe I'll speak just from feedback I get from my candidates, right? Yeah. So, and I think that's probably my biggest point of information and data that I collect, interacting and engaging with senior executives on a daily basis. Mostly, I mean, when people are looking to move, right, the things that mostly they're unhappy with is company culture. And it almost always comes down to that. So I think, in terms of retention strategies, one is obviously just the company culture, like really rethinking it. And it's not just about, these are the values and we've posted it, in our boardroom, and, we've done some wonderful
on the website,
onboard. There's always that, right? And it starts with that, of course. You must articulate the company's vision and mission and, you know, what are the values of the organization. But I think culture is sort of the intangible. It's the DNA of the organization. It's the feel, the look, it's the atmosphere in the office. And I think, you know, it's actually really important to be, you know, for HR professionals to constantly think about how to actually articulate, but also, you know, live those values. And I think it starts, of course, from leadership, right? It starts from the top, of course. It also starts from the hiring process, though, and I think that's one thing that, you know, companies need to think about, is what is our company culture and how strongly do we actually hold on to those values. Mm-hmm. So I've had instances where, you know, we may have, you know, top 2 candidates or maybe even a top candidate for a job, excellent skill set, you know, excellent background, but culture fit isn't there. And sometimes it's about making those hard decisions to say no, because actually in the long run, this person is going to cost us more. Mm-hmm. If they don't prescribe to the values of the organization, then yes, we'll get their skill sets, but, you know, it's going to end up leading to loss of other employees, mm-hmm. or we may not retain them either because there's a mismatch. So I think thinking very carefully about, you know, the hiring process from the beginning, getting, you know, people into the organization that live those values. I've also seen a couple of clients, again, rethink retention strategies and you know, compensation benefits in new ways, and understanding that, you know, one shoe doesn't, you know, it's not one size fits all. Yeah. Where, you know, sometimes you've got 4 generations working in one organization and they all value very different things. Mm-hmm. And so what they've actually, you know, implemented is almost like a token system where employees can actually you know, decide which benefits they would like and which they would prioritize. Do they want a gym membership? Do they want medical insurance? Do they want, you know, flexi working hours? Do they want extra days off, you know, for holidays and travel, etc.? So it's almost like a token system, and you get, you know, a certain number of points, and then you can sort of create your own, you know, benefit structure. Learning and development, of course, as well as part of it, but, you know, being able to put tokens towards that. And then as you, you know, perform at work, as you, you know, get recognized for certain, you know, achievements, or as you actually live out some of the values of the organization, you sort of gain more points that you can, you know, put towards. So it's quite motivating because, of course, you're rewarding employees, mm-hmm. for living out the company values, for, you know, high performance, but in a very tangible way and in a very customized way where they get to, you know, have the benefits that they're focused on. And so I thought that was quite a creative way and a new way to look at traditional structures.
Quite interesting. In the executive search world, one of the key things that we look at is cultural fit. We want to make sure that we get as much information from our clients as to what is your culture? How do you do things? Because the person that we want to bring in, or you want to bring in, should be a good and a perfect match, because then that makes things much easier in terms of settling in and driving what the agenda is for the organization. So that also plays into customer retention for the new hires who come into the organization. Even the onboarding process, we're so much involved in that entire process to make sure that it's so smooth, it is transparent, so that then whoever's coming in feels that I've been, you know, dealt with very much dignity in terms of how everything has gone and the fluidity of the process. So that also leads to retention at the end of the day, because you have thought the process on how you're going to do it. So we have to make sure that that entire journey is very clear, both to the client and the prospective hire that are potentially going to join these companies. So I pick on that aspect of that process.
And do you find companies have an answer to that question when you ask it first? And I'd like to hear from both of you, because, you know, your clients are a bit different. So you have younger companies, you know, doing well, accelerating fast growth. Do you find that they have an answer to that question of what is your culture? How do you do what you do?
For us, I think sometimes they, dance around the questions, but we have very specific questions we ask. How do you do things? What's the decision-making process? Who's involved? Is it a flat organization? And they'll give you those answers. No, flat, we're very direct. We don't accept failure in organizations. Those small nuances you can ask actually gives you what the culture is in an organization. And so when you go back to the person and say, okay, fine, how do you work? This is how I like to work. And you compare those two and you find probably this is not going to be a good culture fit because you like, not delegating too much, you like to be hands-on. And in this organization, they like everything, delegate as much so that, people get the buy-in. So that to me is a small nuances that you can get. So it's about asking the right questions. And so once you understand the client, then you can come back and ask the potential hires, how do you work? What kind of environment do you thrive in? So that begins the conversation of finding out if this is a good culture fit or not. Yeah. So that's a process we undertake.
I think I agree with Vincent for sure. I think, like I said, there's always the company values and the mission and what will be said. And I think what's more important is what is done. Some of that is definitely picked up just through engagement with the leadership team, with the hiring team, understanding how do they communicate, what are the things that they value, what are they prioritizing. So I think through those conversations, through engaging with them, obviously you pick up on a couple of things. It's also understanding where the organization is, what are some of the challenges that they're facing, where are they in their growth stage, because all of that tends to impact what is prioritized. A more mature company may be able to be at the stage where they can prioritize employee wellness and think about, compensation structures and benefits and learning and development programs. A company that is scaling rapidly, they're trying, but at the same time, there's so much more going on. It's so much fast-paced. It's so fast-paced that, in all honesty, they may have these ideas, but what's being implemented, may not be, fully there. However, that could be a great fit for an individual who's looking for that, who's excited by this high growth. Things are moving, things are changing. There's quick decision making. They're looking for that because maybe they feel stifled in a very mature organization where everything is, So there's different fits, depending, I think, on those conversations you have with them. But I also always tell candidates and job seekers, and I think this is one thing that I would say is, as much as you're being interviewed, right, you need to assess the fit, and so I always encourage them to, outside the interview process, ask to speak to employees within the organization. Ask to speak to other team members that you would be interacting with, not just, maybe the hiring manager. If it's possible, I've seen organizations also, have an employee come and spend the morning or spend the day there just to get a feel of, like we said, those intangibles. What's the atmosphere like? And I think that's really important, especially when you're making a very key decision in your career. Do your homework, right? Because I think that's where you get the look and feel and sort of that culture of the organization, not just based on what has been said, but what's actually happening on the ground.
That's quite interesting. That could probably happen in certain level of positions, but as you go up, there's a very public figures, and the whole process is quite different in terms of if you can go into that, going and checking out what's happening in the organizations. At the senior level positions, of which we handle quite a bit, it is more of conversations that you will get to know a lot about organizations, and especially from the hiring managers or the board level or the board members. So I think for the people who are potentially coming in, ask to have a lot of conversations. Yeah,
I agree. I think for sure, especially in confidential searches, and it may be difficult to go into the organization, but absolutely, within confidential spaces, having those conversations, asking those hard questions. I do encourage candidates to do that because an employer should be more than willing to open themselves up, right? Because if they have nothing to hide in a way, they should say yes, talk to people. And I always tell clients as well, tell me and tell a candidate the good, the bad, and the ugly. And that's what I call it, right? Because yes, we want to know all the good things. We want to know what opportunities there are, where the company's going, all the exciting things that will attract the right talent. What are the hard parts of the job, right? What are going to be the challenges? What is this person going to have to face? Is it team dynamics? Is it that we don't have the skill sets? Is it that resources or budget is actually very tight and yet we need to accomplish a lot? What are going to be the challenges that someone's going to step into? But also tell me and tell the candidate the ugly, the things that you don't really want to make public, but that is the reality on the ground. Do you have a bad culture? Have you had a lot of turnover? Is that a problem? Is it a very, fast-paced, cutthroat environment? Whatever it is, I think that transparency in the process is so critical, because actually you want the candidate who has heard the good, the bad, and especially the ugly, and still wants to join you. Right? Because that's the candidate you want to hire. They say, okay, challenge accepted. Okay, I'll be part of changing your culture if needed. I'll step in and do that work. And I think that's the key. The key to finding the right fit is just full transparency.
It's not just what you see on social media.
No, it's not.
Well, I was actually going to bring that in because one of my friends had a hiring disaster. I mean, how much would you say do you look on kind of social media to check out whether the company is telling the truth or whether the candidate is telling the truth? Yeah. I mean, I think could be a real pitfall for some people. Have you encountered anything? You had to say take your Instagram profile down.
Yeah. Well, especially when you're looking at the INGO space, they have that. We are constantly in front of donors. We are constantly in front of people who we need to get money from. And each of these people have their own requirements. And so they require a certain level of sanitization, as it were. Then you have other people who are, companies that are in the news for all the wrong reasons. And, I'm here headhunting for you, but you're in the news for all the wrong reasons. I went through that at some point, and having that front and center of my mind, that when they went in to speak to the business, they also had it front and center, but they had all this data to say, okay, the media is saying this, but here is the data that's not, that sort of skews us in the right direction. And that gave me some sense of, okay, we know where we're going. And so, they would not necessarily be out there in the media saying, oh, those people are lying and getting caught in these crossfires, because it also tarnishes your brand. And so you're saying, if you want to look behind the curtain, we welcome you. But we're not going to go to the level of having these social media wars to sort of sanitize our name. But it is a reality that what you put out as a candidate out there, what your thought leadership looks like, is something that now, we, as we talked about tech, as we are now relying a little bit more on AI to do background checks, to look at who this person is and give us a sort of understanding of the candidate, that these things will be picked up. And you're having platforms that are going to say, Martin Openda is a XYZ, and he has done 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things, and you're giving me a one-pager that's giving me all this information about a person based on what they found in the internet. Right now, GDPR is preventing that. Doesn't mean it's not possible. And so if you ask the right questions to AI, it will give you the answer you're looking for. And so then, as I'm looking at companies, it's the same thing. So social media is a small percentage, but an important percentage of what you're going to see. The questions, how to ask the questions when you interact with the business, is the more important thing, I would say, especially when looking at senior hires. Even when you're looking at now, you're going to grow your career. Every company you enter is a growth step for you. And so even if you're entering as a clerk, if you're entering as an associate, understand the questions to ask to know what environment am I walking into.
That's very important. And what are you going to get out of it? For potential hires is, okay, I'm going to this organization and my time span is this. What are you going to get out of it? It's something for them to actually look at as well. Yeah.
I mean, I wanted to ask one more question, just mainly just from the employability, the employee stance. I mean, are there any kind of specific skills or attributes that are highly valued by employers? What should I kind of think about? I mean, maybe it's just too generic, but maybe, what should I think about if I'm in the interview process? Is there anything that would make me stand out in a hugely competitive market?
Well, I mean, I think one of the things I would say is just continuous learning, right?
Right.
As we've said, the landscape is changing significantly. Tech is coming in. So I think people will no longer have probably, one career in their lives. They may have 4 careers, if I can call it that. They may be shifting industries. So I think it's continuously keeping updated, continuously upskilling yourself, just finishing your education and then working 20, years after that. That's not the model anymore. So continuous learning, continuous development, updating tech skills, of course, that are relevant to, your space. So I think that's going to be obviously a key thing. The second thing I would say, though, is obviously soft skills, because when you have a large pool of candidates with the same or relatively sort of similar qualifications, backgrounds, years of experience, it comes down to the soft skills. Things like communication, things like leadership, EQ, self-awareness as well. I guess that's, I would say, the basis of really everything. When a candidate is self-aware, they know what their strengths are, they know what their gaps are, and they know what they are working on in order to fill that. So I would say that is probably the more general answer. More specifically, what I would tell a candidate is career map, right? Think a couple of years ahead. Think about where you want to end up. Think about what position you want to end up in. And then work your way backwards and think about what are the missing skill sets. So I find candidates who, a lot of the time, maybe they've been in a certain function area. Maybe it's legal or HR or finance or sales. And their end goal is always, I want to be in general management. I want to be a CEO. I want to move and I've now gotten to the top. But how do I get there? And that's about thinking about what are your missing skill sets. If you've fully done commercial all your life, you've got that strength, but you need to now strengthen your financial skills. If, for example, you've been in operations most of your career, then maybe you need some exposure, some experience on the commercial side to round it out. HR as well, right? And, again, so I think it's about thinking about what is the next step and what are the missing skill sets. Even if it's just about looking at a job description online for the next level up or an ideal role that you want to get to, take a look at it, understand, what are hiring managers looking for in that position? What are my gaps? And now how can I fill it? Either from a work perspective, you could ask for, voluntary assignments. You could ask to be, working closely with another functional area just to gain skill sets from them. If it's not possible in your work environment, look outside, get some mentorship from people working in those spaces. Take, courses online, in voluntary organizations, even if it's community-based organizations or anything else, take on those roles to gain those skill sets. And I think that's probably what I would tell candidates thinking about this.
Very well said.
She summed it up.
Yeah, I don't think I have anything else to add. I think it's just self-driven.
Yeah.
That's for individuals to do that, and that is what is going to lead them to their next role. I think having a picture of your journey of where do you want to end up, and she said walk backwards. I think that gives you a roadmap of what do I need to do, okay, who do I need to talk to, and what then are the actionable items. Have a plan and execute it, and you'll find things working out. Yep.
I have a follow-up question. So now, same question, the employer side. What should the employer be doing? Because you're shrinking talent pool, but you want the best of this talent pool. So how should they position themselves to be that employer of choice?
I think it comes down to culture. people now are very, very conscious of who they want to work for and who they don't want to work for. And the word goes out there. And when you do research across board and somebody says, oh, the employer of the year or this year is maybe Safaricom or whatever company it is, it all boils down to culture. How do people do things in that organization that makes people happy? And employees are looking for that. So as an employer, is to create an atmosphere where your culture is very well defined, that people are finding it, a way to connect, and it will spread out there, and people will hear, or your employees will give feedback and say, we like it here because we are treated this way, we are allowed to fail and experiment, and no one comes after you, and those kind of things. Our benefits are good, and you constantly have to evaluate what makes your employees happy. You have to constantly check with them, ask questions, surveys, and all that data informs you what you need to do to make sure that everyone is happy. So I think on the employer side, those are the critical things that you need to do. I think for me, what stands out is culture.
I think, I guess to answer your question, candidates and employees, if we're telling them, career map, right? Think about your next move. How do you want to get there? Employers want to retain that talent, and that's important for them. So they need to also be thinking and understanding, where do their employees want to be? What does that career path look like for them? And I think, multinationals, maybe large organizations do this a little bit better sometimes. Yeah. But obviously there's, career advancement plans, right? Thinking about, okay, what's the next step up? And then actually, providing the training, the mentorship, etc. needed to get your employees up to the next step. So I think obviously that is a critical aspect. But I also think that sometimes, and I see this quite often, candidates will come to me to say, look, I love being here, but there's just no growth. I'm now head of sales and there's a commercial director, and until he moves, I don't have there's no step up for me, and he's not going to move anytime soon, right? It's going to be like 3-4 years. So, there's also maybe employees, at sort of a lower level, maybe there's a little bit more mobility. As you get to a more senior level, there's a little bit less. But this is where I would challenge, companies to think creatively again, right? To say, okay, fine, but what else can you provide? So, as we mentioned, rounding out your experience, could that, head of sales, if they're looking for growth, they can't step into the commercial director role, but maybe they can have times when they do to sort of, experience that, engage that, whether it's, they sort of take over the role for a week, every month or something, to get that little bit of exposure, a bit of mobility, a bit of challenge. But also, could they take on roles where they're now, liaising with finance a lot more to gain the financial skill sets that they might need? So, I think it's just about employers being a bit more creative around how can we provide that growth, that challenge for our employees to keep them engaged. Because as soon as they're not engaged, they're looking outside. Right? Sure. And so it's just about, or like I said, even outside of it, could they handle projects, right, that are maybe outside the daily job? So I think it's just about really thinking outside the box and non-traditionally.
I mean, as you would do for your business anyway, for the growth. So I mean, and businesses are more people-centric than they ever have, and people are the most important part of a business. So that I think it's hugely important.
Quite interesting, because I'll give you one of the companies I worked for while I was still in college, FedEx, and they had a very simple model: people, service, profit. They invested a lot on the PSP model of what do we need to do to really engage our employees and in turn give good service, and then in turn then affect our bottom line. And when I left that organization, I truly believed that they had actually impacted me on that level, because as an employee they had paying tuition for college, all these things. And when I asked quite a lot of people who are in that organization, they've been there for like 30-40 years. And I was like amazed. How would somebody, you know, like I was young and I'm like, you've been here for 30 years? Yeah, because I love working here, you know, the culture. And that's what employers need to do. It just comes down to people. Yeah, take care of your people and
They'll take care of your
You'll
profit.
see the results.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Oh, well, on that note, thank you so much for joining us. If anyone wants to be involved more in that conversation, then on February the 8th, between 5 and 8 p.m, KOFISI Square, Liban Cliff and Serio will be continuing this conversation on a higher level. And he'll be talking about, you know, how to hire and how you can, how to be hired in an interactive workshop. Vincent from Stanton Chase, Sehar from Hire Africa, and Martin, talent analyst and of course podcast guru from Retooled Africa. Thank you so much for all your time.
Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
Pleasure.